Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this day, the first of our Vectra webinars, where we will be discussing Vectra's answer to hybrid cloud detection and response. This webinar is proudly hosted by Team CRS. So, who is CRS? Well, Cyber Retaliate Solutions is an authorized cybersecurity distributor with a number of world-class solutions to offer. We're also an IBM training center with training centers in Centurion, Midrand, Sandton, as well as Cape Town. In addition, we are a Red Hat SUSE as well as Agile training partner. Further, CRS also provides cyber awareness training that is centered around phishing simulations, and awareness training that would be tailored to the unique needs of your unique organization. So yes, to start, let us speak about home for a moment. The South African market faces a deficit of hybrid cloud detection and response solutions. So despite the growing cybersecurity concerns, limited awareness and infrastructure challenges hinder the adaptation of advanced cloud-based NDR type technologies, which in terms of addressing the gap is crucial to fortify the nation's digital defenses and protect against emerging cyber threats. A hybrid cloud detection response solution would be imperative in today's rapidly evolving digital landscape. With the escalating complexity of cybersecurity threats, traditional on-premise security measures tend to fall short. A hybrid cloud detection response solution empowers your organization to detect, analyze, as well as respond to threats in real time across your distributed networks, which would aid to enhance your visibility, your scalability, as well as your agility, all the while safeguarding critical data from sophisticated attacks. This would offer you real-time threat visibility, scalability, as well as adaptability, which would allow your organization to effectively defend against evolving cyber threats whilst efficiently managing their security infrastructure. Thank you very much, Chloe. So as I was mentioning, in the context of your NDR, AI technologies are utilized to analyze your network traffic, detect anomalies, as well as identify potential threats. This is where Vectra would come in as a leading cybersecurity company that specializes in network detection and response solutions. Leveraging artificial intelligence as well as machine learning, Vectra provides real-time threat detection as well as analysis, which would enable your organization to swiftly identify and respond to cyber threats across your networks, which would enhance your overall security posture. This would enable Vectra to autonomously learn and adapt to evolving cybersecurity threats, enhancing the overall effectiveness of threat detection and response capabilities. With that being said, I would like to hand over the reins to Mr. Rich Vines, who will continue our presentation.
So yes, thank you ever so much for joining. I'm Rich Vines. I'm the commercial sales manager for Vectra. So the biggest challenge that we have is the ever expanding attack surface within organizations. The attack surface has increased exponentially. So, you know, we're not just looking after endpoints and our own data centers anymore. SaaS and Microsoft 365 has moved us all into the cloud, as has Active Directory. We also have our hybrid networks now, pushing infrastructure as a service into the cloud. And of course, you know, IoT and OT, making you know, interconnected devices on the network with the inability to put endpoint agents on them even more difficult to secure. And we know that attackers are becoming ever more evasive. They can evade controls like EDR, get round seam detection rules, and of course go undetected by signature-based tools. So I'll take you through the Vectra platform and how it works. Vectra's flagship product, as you can see down across the bottom, is Detect for Network. With Vectra Detect for Network, pretty much 100% of our customers have this, but the name network actually belies the depth of this component of our platform. So when we're talking about network, we're not just talking about your traditional network. your data centers, your remote offices. We're also talking about giving you coverage across all of your virtualized environments, and of course, any infrastructure as a service that you've pushed into the cloud. We're also protecting identity, so Microsoft Active Directory, whether that's on-prem, in Azure, or what we see the majority of the time deployed in a hybrid mode. And of course, we're also protecting SaaS. We're protecting Microsoft 365. Now, when we talk about protecting Microsoft 365, we're not talking about your traditional email filtering, anti-phishing. We're actually talking about securing the entire control plane. And, if people have up to, E5 licensing, that's securing all 45 applications and all 100 productivity tools that Microsoft have on offer. We're also protecting the cloud as well. So currently, control plane for AWS. So we detect for network, we protect infrastructure as a service that's pushed into AWS, Azure, GCP, etc. But with detect for AWS, we're protecting the entire control plane. Now, with Vectra's platform, we use our AI-driven detection and response to be able to triage the issues and then serve them up in a prioritized way that enables you to guide your team or your customers' teams to the most dangerous threats that need to be handled immediately. Now, when we get to that point, we can respond in two very different ways, depending on the size of organization. For the more nimble organizations, the smaller ones, we do the targeted response. Vectra fully integrates with your customers' existing security investments and will use and leverage their manual enforcement points like firewalls, like NACs, but we also fully integrate with their EDR. And as you can see over to the bottom right-hand side of the screen, Vectra fully integrates with the endpoint. So the one part that we're not covering is endpoint. That's a very well-trodden path. So we choose bi-directional integration. The main vendors that we integrate with globally are CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Microsoft Defender, Cyber, for instance, but we've got about 16 out of the box point and click integrations. Now, for the more mature organization, we can actually do targeted investigation where we will integrate with their ticketing system, with their SOAR, and provide high fidelity information up to their SIEM. So you don't have to start with the entire platform. About 75% of new customers start just with detect for network. A group of them then also include Office 365, and then after that they include AWS. But with threat detection being so critical, and a lot of organizations either not having a large dedicated SOC or security team, we also provide a full 24/7 MDR wrap if that's needed. So in the context that as a partner, you don't offer your own managed services, but want to have the ability to sell them, you can resell Vectra MDR. Or if you're already an MSSP and you provide your own MDR solution, we're more than happy for you to include Vectra as part of that and extend your reach to cover Vectra. Where do you deploy Vectra? The reason that I've included this slide is some people say, well, we've got all of our endpoint technology and we've got our EDR. I struggle to see where we would fit Vectra, and this is exactly what we're demonstrating here. So over on the left, that's your endpoint, all your perimeter technologies. They are still absolutely essential to your customers and to your organizations. They're the ones that keep most of the known and the 98% of threats out. But what happens when the 2% of the real threats get in? And that's where Vectra comes in. So Vectra are a post-compromise technology, and what we do is we cover the security gap as this part of the attack life cycle. So if people get in, as soon as they start escalating privileges or doing what attackers do, that's where Vectra finds and identifies the threat. So I think the figures that you see are always somewhere between, attackers are always in an environment somewhere between 120 to 280 days before breach. This is where we close that gap down and we enable our customers to be extremely successful in finding those those compromises before they do become breaches, and identifying them as early as possible in the attack life cycle before data's exfiltrated, ransomware's deployed, all of those other things, when they're living off the land in the network, but also living off the land in SaaS applications as well, and leveraging those 100 tools that Microsoft make available that they don't monitor them themselves. We've covered the network. Let's have a look at what we do for the Microsoft estate. So as I've said before, with organizations that have M365, it's in the cloud, depending on their licensing, whether it's an F-type license, an E3 or E5. There are a number of applications available to organizations, but critically, a number of productivity tools as well. And what's very important to understand is that Microsoft isn't a security company, they're a productivity tools company. So even with E5, the top license, all that's really getting you is strong control and compliance. It's not getting you deep threat detection. So Vectra add an additional 35 AI threat detection modules across the entire attack lifecycle. So what we see, blue is for Active Directory, green is for the M365 estate. And what we are enabling our customers to do is to identify more threats earlier in the attack lifecycle, have those surfaced up in a highly prioritized way, and giving customers more chances to be successful before the attackers are, to catch them mid-attack versus after the fact. Now, what makes Vectra different is the way that we approach AI. So up until, very recently, AI had almost had a dirty, it was almost a dirty word. Everybody was using it. Even 6 months ago, when we mentioned AI, people would roll their eyes. And then came along ChatGPT, and the big rise in OpenAI, and suddenly it's de rigueur at the moment. Vectra have been around for 12 years, and we were doing AI really before AI was a thing. And there are two ways that you can approach it. You can approach it like some of our competitors do, with a general purpose algorithm. Now, that general purpose algorithm is great for finding lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff very broadly, across the environment, but it's a general purpose algorithm. So within there, you're going to have an awful lot of false positives. So if you're just looking for anomalies, that's really all you're going to get. Vectra, on the other hand, decided that, well, AI algorithms are the way to go, but rather than general purpose algorithm, which is just going to throw up anomalies, is going to be very, very noisy. It's going to be very difficult for people to find. What we're going to do is we're going to develop a number of very highly specialized, very narrow, but very deep algorithms. So rather than a single general purpose algorithm, we're going to have multiple algorithms. I believe we've got somewhere in the region of somewhere between up to about 140 interlaced algorithms at the minute. So what we have is each algorithm provides higher coverage on a specific outcome or an attack vector, provides higher coverage but much lower noise, so that that it's a very high fidelity alert. And what that actually looks like across the attack lifecycle, when we map this against the MITRE ATT&CK framework, as you'll see here on this rather busy slide, Vectra have a number of algorithms that interlace and overlay each other, but also cover either a single or multiple level or multiple layers of the attack lifecycle, meaning that we're looking for very, very specific things in a very high fidelity way. And rather than surfacing you up with noise, When you get a detection, when you get an alert, you can have extremely high confidence in its efficacy. And we do that across the board, and we are constantly developing these. So we have it across supervised and unsupervised, and we have also multiple deep learning. So we have our unsupervised, we have our supervised, that you can look at, that you can that you can roll across your organization. And actually, when you deploy Vectra, these deploy automatically. They begin learning your customer's environment, and certainly these only take 2 to 3 weeks to train before we start to get some very, very, very high fidelity detections. Hopefully that's explained the difference between Vectra's AI approach and the typical AI approach that most people take. So to give you an example of this, we're going to use an actual Vectra customer. So yes, this is a very large organization, but when we show you a large organization, it actually really demonstrates how Vectra's approach boosts efficiency by up to 83 times. So this organization is Unilever. So yes, massive organization. But actually what we're looking at is how Vectra takes all of the information, filters it down. So nearly 200,000 hosts, nearly 51 terabytes of data a day. That flags 29,000, over 29,000 events, which turn into 1,000, nearly 1,250 detections. Now, typically with other vendors, you'll have 1,250 detections or anomalies to go and sift through, right? And even if you've got a big SOC team, that's a never-ending task. But most organizations that we encounter, especially in the commercial space, have somewhere between 3 and 5 people. And if you're coming in to that number of detections every day, it's a thankless task. People get burnt out, people leave. It's difficult to keep people on board. So what Vectra does is we take those detections and we say, okay, fine, those detections, actually, let's look at hosts or accounts. That's about 356. Of those 356, let's map that against a threat uncertainty matrix. And actually what we start to see is, okay, out of those 356 hosted with detection, only 5 are critical. They're the most dangerous and they're the furthest advanced across the threat lifecycle. So what we do and what we recommend, and I'm going to steal Chloe's phrase here, is critical is what you do when you come in the morning before you have a coffee, right? You get into those, you look at them. Now, each alert will have multiple detections underneath it. It will have multiple sources of evidence to show you why that's been surfaced up to you in that particular way. So if you're a team of 1, 3, 5 people, dealing with those 5 first is going to be very easy to manage. Now, once you've done that, you've got your coffee, you've had a chat, talked about the latest box set on Netflix that you're watching. We've then got high, and then you then move to looking at the alerts in high. And then if you have time after lunch, you can then, maybe look at medium or low, or use medium low to actually do proactive threat hunting and to really understand there. But what we're demonstrating here is by taking that very highly specialized AI approach that covers either singular or multiple areas of the MITRE ATT&CK lifecycle, we're able to take a huge amount of information and distill it down to some very, very specific, very high fidelity alerts, so that organizations know exactly where to prioritize their effort in the fastest, most effective way that also minimizes analyst burnout. So what do Vectra do for security teams? So I'm not really a big fan of big, bold numbers and statements. I think vendors tend to make them up, right? 80% of all statistics are made up, right? However, this came out of a report from the analyst IDC when they evaluated Vectra recently. And what they found is that organizations that deploy Vectra have 90% fewer blind spots. So what we're not doing, we're not saying to you today, Vectra is the silver bullet. Absolutely not. But what we are saying is that Vectra can be a very big part of the threat detection and response strategy for your customers. integrate us with their existing security investments and EDR, and we're pretty much there, right? We're pretty game changing. The biggest stat for me is the reduction in alert noise, because we do know that alert fatigue is a big thing. We do know that every breach report you read, a product alerted on it, and people either missed it or the alerts have been switched off because they've been misconfigured. So we're reducing alert noise by 85%. We're increasing analyst productivity, and we're also drastically increasing the number of threats that can be proactively identified. So I've talked a lot about Vectra, but I haven't talked a lot about our ecosystem. So for those of you that were, I guess, paying attention to my my monotone drawl earlier on, when I was talking about the platform, I was talking about how we integrate with existing security investments. And this is how, we make organizations more successful. So we'll integrate with the other technologies that you've already sold your customers, but we'll also integrate and add value to all of the other technologies that other resellers have sold your customers, and help you increase the value that you provide to them. And whether that's SaaS, whether it's SOAR, SIEM, EDR, or whether it's firewalls or other technologies, as long as they have an open API, we'll be able to integrate with them. And for the main, for the mainstay of organizations, we'll have some demonstrable use cases. So for instance, we can demonstrate our integration with Microsoft Sentinel or with Splunk. During the demonstration in the platform, if you're eagle-eyed, you'll see connections to Microsoft Defender or Sentinel or CrowdStrike. And also we can work with with ticketing systems, SOARs, etc., etc. So what do we do for South Africa? So Vectra is able to map and actually provide out of the box answers for the 2022 Cybercrimes Act and also for POPI. We fully automate investigation. We have multiple rules for catching malicious insiders, and we provide rapid ROI for customers. So probably one of the biggest case studies we have is actually a university in North America called Texas A&M. And by cutting the time that they spend on investigation from days to minutes, we're able to save them $7 million over the course of the year. Now, again, a very extreme example, but a very real example of the speed in which organizations can use the Vectra platform to speed their investigations, be far more successful, and find people much earlier, that you can map directly to value required within your region. So all of this is great, and all of this sounds wonderful, and I'm sure you've heard all of these sorts of things from many vendors before, and certainly I'll leave you to read the section on the left on this slide to yourselves. But why would you want to partner with Vectra? So as Jacobane said at the top of the call, CRS are Vectra's distributor for South Africa. Vectra are a 100% channel only organization. So what that means is that there is only one organization in your region that I can take a purchase order from, and that's CRS. So what that means is that we do not sell direct, we will not sell direct, and at no point will you find suddenly your deals disappearing because we've decided that we're going to take this deal direct because we're a little bit low at the minute on the number. So we aim to make our partners as much money as possible. We guide around 20% plus in terms of margin. Sometimes that can be much more. We had a partner recently in the UK on a dark trace compete. It was a $350,000 3-year opportunity. They made 28% margin. Sometimes if it's government or it's healthcare, it might be a little bit lower, but that's what we aim to do. Our view is if we pay it forward and you make money, then you'll be happy and you'll want to sell more. And if you sell more, everybody makes more money. Simplistic, I know, but that's how we go. We've got a very strong deal registration program as well. So should you find an opportunity, so that, let's envision you think, yep, absolutely, Rich, this blows our socks off, we want to sign up as a partner with CRS. You go off and you put effort in and you put a deal in to register it. What happens when the deal reg comes in? We give you an automatic 30 days on the registration, and that's to go off and book either the first, Teams or call or whatever. We'll join you on it. We'll validate that there is a real opportunity. Then that deal gets locked to you. We do not switch deal regs. The only thing that gets a deal reg cancelled is inactivity for, for 30, 60 days. But we'll be in contact and we'll discuss that. But the deal registrations don't get switched between partners just because. We also have a partner aligned sales team. So for every opportunity you register, we will allocate you a Vectra sales resource and pre-sales resource as well, which in the early days is critical, right? We need you to be experts in your customers. We'll be experts in Vectra and we'll help you sell the platform, typically for for as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, but in harmony with, doing the right thing for the customer. There's also great services attached. We are, Microsoft complementary. So if you're not currently a Microsoft reseller, or even if you are reselling Microsoft licenses and, making yourself a healthy 3 or 5%, with Microsoft attach and with Vectra, it gets you access to that Microsoft spend. And, for those of you who's thinking, yeah, but, what about all of the E5 customers? Do they really need this? 55% of our Microsoft customers have an E5 license. So absolutely. That's really the Vectra difference. And I like to focus on the fact that we are partner first and we are only partner as well. Thanks, Clay. So to give you an idea of, 3 profiles, we've gone, big, medium, small. So big is a retail bank in the UK. They only had 2 real issues. They were rolling out Microsoft Teams. They were pushing into AWS, and they were very concerned about security. Because both were in the cloud, we did a cloud POV. Took us 25 minutes to spin it up. We had a purchasing decision within 2.5 weeks and a purchase order 5.5 weeks later. That's $1.5 million for a 1-year deal. So those deals are lovely, but they don't come along that often. The next one is actually something that my team specialise in, and it was a Darktrace replace. They're a mid-size financial services and insurance organisation. They'd had Darktrace for 3 years. They'd really struggled to realise the value, found the tool very noisy, and had also struggled with the commercial behaviour of Darktrace. Again, very fast sales cycle. The great thing about we find with some Darktrace customers is, they already knew enough of a problem to go and buy something. They want to genuinely fix the problem, but Darktrace didn't quite cut it for them. That was a 3-year deal, 2.1 million, 10-week sales cycle, and we also added Office 365 and AWS. And then the opportunity at the bottom was just a small social housing organisation, relatively small, 250 people. We did an initial detect for network deal. Over the course of the first year, we really showed value. We were looking at, a modest size renewal, but through our work and the work of our team and our customer success team, and actually Chloe that's on the call with us, they then chose to add detect for AWS and actually add Sidekick, which is what we used to call our MDR service as well. So that was a 200% add-on as well. So what we tend to see with customers is, Vectra customers, in the UK, we've had some customers 9-10 years. We're very good at delighting our customers and keeping them happy. We stay engaged with them through their entire, customer journey, and we keep them up to date. We constantly introduce them to, what's happening, making sure that they're protected. As their environment evolves, we're making sure that we evolve the deployment so that we don't get into the stage where, we're out of touch, or, we're that vendor that turns up with, 3 months before the renewal asking where our purchase order is. So an idea of some recent customer wins. So as you can see, you know, top left, we've already talked about Unilever. We've also talked about Fidelity Investments with the Dark Trace Replace, but we've got defence contractors, universities, colleges, central government departments. We've got utilities here with Bristol Water. We've got healthcare and private healthcare so we've got public healthcare with the NHS, private healthcare with Bupa. And one of the beauties of the Vectra platform is it doesn't matter whether you're a small 250 person organisation or a global behemoth like Unilever, it's the same Vectra platform. So Vectra scales in an extremely linear way, and is relevant to anyone from around 250 users and above, right up to your organisation with hundreds of thousands of employees distributed globally.
Awesome. Morning, everyone. So what I'm going to do is just back up Rich's slides and just show you what a day in the life of using this product is from a nice simple workflow, right? As Rich said, what we do is we, prioritize the workload in the form of alerts. We're not a noisy tool. We're specifically designed to focus in on attacker behavior. And give you confidence in what we're actually showing you rather than an anomaly-driven tool. And how we do that is most of us, especially most of my customers, they are more reactive rather than proactive. So they will get an alert and then they will go, okay, I'm going to investigate that, right? You can completely control the times of alerts and when they are alerted to you in terms of scoring, but ultimately you will follow a link and you will hit this dashboard. You saw an example of this quadrant earlier, and Rich stole my analogy about the coffee, and absolutely that's where we're going, right? Critical is where you can start. So you can log in and you can say, oh, I've got 11 critical. That's where I need to focus my time here. Now, this is a demo dashboard. So we've injected it with examples. In reality, it won't be a noisy quadrant on that. We're a concurrent IP licensed product when it comes to Detect for Network, user driven when it's the M365 part. They're the most common sort of questions to ask when we're going into pricing here. But let's have a look at what these 11 hosts are doing here. Now, hosts or network entities in this sense, they will be anything consuming an IP address in this case. As Rich said, our bread and butter is the network. We can also do accounts, AAD accounts, Office 365 accounts, all of that good stuff. So what I've clicked here is I've got this quadrant. I'm actually just going to expand it to all. And top right, it's like the opposite of Gartner. Top right's where you don't want to be. Each one of these little dots are representing a host displaying attacker behavior. Okay. Attacker behavior is scored in two ways because one of our main differentiators is that we give you that high fidelity alert. How do we get there? We measure in two ways. One, threat. Threat makes sense because we are a security focused tool. And based on how dangerous we are observing this behavior, because we are observing it based on what it is doing, we're going to give you that number. So that's simpler to understand. The higher the number, the worse it is. How we rule out anomalies and how we make sure that we're actually giving you information that's very security focused is the certainty part. The certainty is displaying, okay, based on what we've observed and how dangerous it is, and also the steps that they have gone through to string together their attack. Attackers don't just come in, land on the crown jewels and go, oh, look, I can easily exfiltrate this from here, right? There are a lot of techniques that they have to do to find their way around in an environment that they don't know. So let's say it's the subject of a phishing attack. They don't actually know how far they can go with those credentials, right? So they have to do reconnaissance. They have to do lateral movement. And those are what increases the certainty value, right? The certainty plays a huge part here. In the background, it's very complicated. How we present it is nice and simple. But ultimately, let me give you an example of what an anomaly, a useless anomaly is. And a useless anomaly is when you see, you know, a user that got a new laptop on Friday because of whatever reason. It was old, they smashed it, whichever one. And then on Monday, they walk into one of your branch offices because, you know, they're a remote user, whatever, or they're usually remote and now they're in the office, and they connect to your internet and they Google something, because that is the basis of all life, right? Everyone Googles stuff. What that would trigger in an anomaly-driven tool is a new host with a Mac IOU, a new account being used on that host that we've never observed before, and it's using a new UDP port out to the internet that also we have never observed before. That would potentially trigger 3 anomalies, right? Now, all that actually is a member of staff with a new laptop, and they are just going about their day-to-day in a different location, right? We reduce that noise by certainty because we see it all, we are not going to put it into the critical quadrant. And that's an example, right? If that new host with a new account suddenly started accessing privileged areas that we had never seen that has a high value, so suddenly started doing file share enumeration, then started spreading laterally to another host, that would be a clearer signal that that is actually, you know, someone abusing either a host in the environment or an account. So that's what we mean, and that's the value of certainty, and it does it automatically. Now, at the moment, I just got dots on the screen. Let's have a look at some sort of host here. So I've got Conrad here. I'm going to pick on Conrad. So if in reality, I'm going to get an alert, I need to know context. One of the big parts of what we do as well is if you just get an alert and you then need to go and look in, you know, 5 other systems to figure out what that host did to constitute getting an alert, that's not a very efficient investigation time. What we do is we give you an aerial view of all the detections here. We can give you an attack profile. It's designed to be simple to use. So if a user comes in and says, oh, this is ransomware, they instantly know most likely what's happened on this host, right? Because we know what ransomware is. This is actually an example of a more mature ransomware. It's not just something that gets onto laptops and starts to encrypt. It actually done a lot of reconnaissance work to get to something more central. We all know what ransomware is. It encrypts files, right? But look how much evidence we gave you before the worst happens. We absolutely see the exfiltration or the detonation or the worst case scenario that happens on a detonation point of view. But what we actually do for our customers is we give them confidence before the worst has happened so they can do something about it. That makes sense. Now I can see here that there was command and control, reconnaissance, accounts used. I'm going to drill into a couple of these in a minute. But what ransomware has started to detonate here, but that wasn't actually the worst part at this point, because a lot of my customers and a lot of people out there have invested in backup tools. So although it being convenient, get ransomware, they can recover about paying the Bitcoin fee, which if you are someone looking for Bitcoin fees is very inconvenient, right? So what they did was they stole the data also, and this is a very different problem, right? You've now got to figure out what data is gone. We can give you that, no problem. And you've got to tell people, relevant people, that data is gone, you know, customers or whatever, and things like that. So we don't want to tell you after the horse bolted. We want to allow you to do something in these steps, the earlier stages of the attack. Now, if I want to drill into any of these behaviors, I can just click one more time and I get a full write-up. I've clicked into privilege anomaly. We actually have a lot of patents around how we do this, but ultimately we observe accounts and hosts and their privilege rights as well as service accounts, and we figure out how they are used together normally, baseline on other terms, right? The power of this is that we can identify things like an account takeover, suspicious admin, because people legitimately do things that are very consistent as users. They might use a different device, but they usually access or utilize the same privilege levels around their account. And it's not always the highest privilege that they have, right? So we go very deep into understanding that. What we've figured here is that there is a host Conrad and an account Conrad being used together. That's normal, quite often paired. However, they're accessing a service, which is a high privilege service, sorry. But it's not a service we have seen being accessed in this way before. Now, I can show you who normally accesses this, Anna, Luke and Jim. That's great. I can then do my due diligence if I was, an MDR analyst and say, let's just have a quick look what Conrad does as a role and what Alan, Luke and Jim do as a role. And I figured out that they're in different departments. So why are they utilising this in this way? And we've never seen it. So therefore, I can be very confident that Conrad is acting suspiciously, most likely because his credentials have gone. Now let's follow this story, right? If I click one more time, I can actually see that this here, what I've gone over now is into an account of Conrad. And I can see that there's lots of account detections. In this case, I can see that there is a hybrid environment, Azure AD account, mapped to a network account, Conrad. This is the most common way that people are running their Active Directories. Not that many customers, in my experience, have fully migrated away from their on-prem. But if you are using any sort of SaaS from a service from Office 365, Azure AD is needed for that. So what they do is they hybrid it. And I can see here that the ransomware actually came in via email, still the most common way of malware getting in, and also the most common way of having account credentials stolen. So I can see suspicious sign-on here, DLL hijacking activity, and the fact that there has been some locked files already in my SharePoint, for example. Now, we go a lot deeper into understand the control plane. As Rich said, we are not looking at the anti-phishing, anti-spam. You've already got that. We are looking for when they fail and an attacker has compromised your environment. Now, we absolutely can show you all of the detail and context around this. Absolutely. However, what can we do about it is a big question hanging over most customers' sort of heads. They can identifying it as one thing, but we actually say, like, we're going to give you help on what to do with it. And our response approach is to use right tool for right job. There is not a blanket way of doing response well, right? In this case, I've got Active Directory integration here, and what I can do is disable this account, right? It's already disabled here, but I can go in, click the button and temporarily disable this account using an API hook into Active Directory. This is a free integration, and take away the resource of that attacker. Now that is a very surgical and reliable way of pausing that attacker's progression, especially after something like a suspicious sign-on, right? From that one. Now, that's great if it's an account-based attack. Now, what we also can do is, if you remember from Rich's slide about the ecosystem, is that we can integrate with other tools as well to make sure that we can give you the right response option. Now, we integrate with EDRs as well. EDRs are very good at what they do. They give you the deep and narrow of what's going on your host and endpoints, right? We give you the aerial view of what's going on in your environment. Using the two together just gives you more visibility and also more options to do something about something early on. And this is what I've got here. I've got a Defender ATP example. I think it's Defender for Endpoint now. I can't remember the name. Very popular in the sense that we can just pop that into an isolated environment as well. And this is a free integration also. If you have Defender ATP or any EDR, lock that host. This would make a lot of sense if you are seeing, you know, something, an endpoint being suspicious, and great if it hasn't spread laterally properly yet, right? We can also do things like integrate with firewalls. So when you know, hidden HTTPS tunnels are found, and you don't know, we can show you how many hosts are trying to connect to that. It would make much more sense to block any connectivity to that, you know, offending IP that's external to you, than lock every single host, right? For you to go and do something about it.